Hi, everyone, and welcome to Code of Conduct, the back-end engineering podcast, which is by engineers and for engineers. We have got an awesome show lined up as we're joined by Kat Ross, who is principal engineer at Capital One. So, hey, Kat, thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Now, I'm actually really excited about what we're going to cover today and what we're going to jump into. But I guess before we do that, could you just share a little bit about where you are in your career now and I guess how you got started?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, you want to go all the way back in high school, I was good at math. And so I was like, I'm good at math and I want to make some money. So I went to college for computer science and ended up being decently good at it and actually liking it a lot. So I was super, super lucky. And then got an internship after my third year with Capital One in like Northern Virginia area, which is where I'm from. So I was commuting to this internship and then went back to school for a year and was looking for a full-time job and was begging Capital One to let me live in New York. And they finally gave in after some threatening, etc. Um, but moved up to New York and I've been working from New York for Capital One for almost 3 years now. So like 3 and 7 months, which has been awesome. I am like pretty much fully back end. I work specifically now on the bank account opening website. So in the back end where like a lot of the rules handling happens. So I don't know if people know this, but a lot of times when you apply to a bank account, we like check your identity and check a lot of things back there to make sure you're eligible for an account and have a lot of rules and restrictions. So I handle a lot of the like architecture and rules and how they work in the back end, which has been really cool. And we're like really trying to make a push to make more people eligible. So we're trying to make different pathways to allow people to like verify their identity and stuff. Um, and it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot of stuff. I think a lot of times, like I had come in being like, I'm smart, like I know things. And I've been like proven wrong every single time. I walk in the door, I'm like, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, it's fine, we'll explain it to you. But yeah, it's been a ton of fun.
Well, I think, one thing just straight off the bat that I think I have to jump into is, you grew up in Virginia, you
Mhm.
were good at math, and you made the decision to study computer science. Now, I know we're not talking a lifetime ago, you're not 60
Yeah.
years old or anything like that, but, you know, when I was in school, the girls being smart and good at something, it was still something that you kind of tried to hide or
Yeah.
you didn't necessarily shout about. So when you made the decision to go and study computer science, how how was that received? Like by friends, by family? Was it a shock?
Um, to my family, no. And to my close friends, no. But I think that like I totally agree with you. And I was like lying about my grades in the opposite way for a long time when I was a kid.
Wow.
um, because it wasn't like super cool to be smart. Like
Yeah.
that wasn't like a thing. And then I kind of fell in with a crowd in high school that was um, more driven and more accepting of me being driven, which was awesome and supportive. And so, I took a computer science class in high school. And I remember, and like, sorry to everyone, but like I was doing like all of their homework. Like, they were like, Kat, like and I was like one of like 5 girls in the class, and they were like, Kat, can you do it? Because I don't understand. And so I think that was like really encouraging while, yeah, cheating, I guess. But I think when I decided, people were like, oh, that makes sense.
Mm.
And then being at a school, I went to University of Virginia, being at a school that was of really high caliber where like everyone was smart, and if you weren't smart, like that was the problem, was an like eye-opening experience, because like I was like all of a sudden I was like, oh wait, like I'm actually not smart here.
Yeah. It's just like a little bit of humble pie where you kind of, maybe you walked in thinking like everybody's going to ask me to do their homework again. And you were like, oh, wait, people are better than me.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, I'm suddenly like dreading my math class. Like, get the test back, like just put them in your backpack. We'll open them at the end of the day. Like, it was a very like 180 experience, but super humbling. And like, it only went up from there, obviously. But
Now, you strike me as someone who's very transparent, very honest, and is that something that you would attribute to being a successful engineer? Is actually honesty?
yeah, I think a lot of it. I think a lot of I came in wanting to pretend that I knew what was going on. And one of the big like things that they tell you when you start work at Capital One as like a college grad is like, don't try to be smart. Like you're not, because you don't know what's going on, and that's fine. And so like kind of playing that like card of like, hey, I don't know what's like I'm new, I don't know what's happening, was so helpful. And like still I do it all the time. I'm like 2 years, 8 months into my career, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know what that is, or like, I can't figure out how this works. Um, I feel like being really honest about when you're struggling does save like a lot of hassle in the future, because as soon as you start faking it and as soon as you like don't go to people for help, it gets worse. There's obviously a snowball effect, and then all of a sudden you're bad at your job because you refused to ask for help when it was like totally reasonable to. And I think that's like a big thing that I've been scared of, that I've seen people start to fall in. Some of my coworkers, when they start out, they're like, no, I get it, I don't need your help. And I'm like, are you it's totally fine. Like, are you sure? Because like I don't want people to be trapped in this like, no, I've got it. And then finding out they don't got it, but it's so far down the line. Because it is like jobs are hard and technology is changing literally constantly. Like there's no way any of us know what's going on. So like for me to be like, I don't know what's going on, everyone's like, yeah, duh, me neither. This is what I think I know. Is I feel like important part of the job to
What?
say when you're beat.
And that's interesting for me, because speaking with engineers, it's almost like everybody thinks the same way, but are scared to act it, right? And one of the recurring themes that keeps coming up is a little bit about imposter syndrome, and almost people feeling that if they do ask for help or they don't know the answers, how are they going to be judged? What are their peers going to think? And in this world, we often hear about fake it till you make it. And, you know, in a predominantly male dominated environment, is there ever some of that that has to apply in terms of having confidence, having the confidence in yourself and your ability, confidence to ask the questions? Like, how do you kind of level up to the point where you get that confidence?
Yeah, I feel like I want to gather all my thoughts correctly. Like there are so many steps that come before the confidence. I feel like you have like you need to be fully honest when you don't know what's going on. Like, yeah, I'm stupid at this job right now. And I also feel like you need to create, if you can, a support system where you can be honest and transparent. And once you have this, like, we call it like psychological safety at Capital One, like making sure that everyone feels psychologically safe to say and express what they are feeling and thinking. And once you have that, like you can be confident because everyone's being honest that, you know, Jim does not know how to do this and you do, and that you should own it. And like, I do feel like the technology industry tends to like celebrate, I think I've talked about like, you know, there's like the art of bullshit is like very like whoever talks first and fastest and loudest, no matter what it is, like people are like, oh, that sounded good. Like, yeah, we should use, you know, MongoDB. And it's like, well, but why? Like, and it's, I feel like not enough people are being like, I don't know what you mean. Like, that does not make sense to me, because it's like scary. Like and it comes off as like, I don't know what I'm talking about. But I think those questions like are so important of like, hey, can you explain why we would use that? That does not make any sense to me. And as they start explaining it, a lot of times they're like, there might be better like technologies for this. And I found that like asking and being confident to ask, and then also being confident like when you know something and when you do own it, like that's just not how it works. Then like there's a way to say it without belittling people, but it's important to state your opinion and be confident about it when you do know your shit, because you do know something. I mean, like we all are saying, oh yeah, I know every technology. You sit in interviews and you're like, yeah, I have a little bit of experience with that one time. But there's stuff that like we are really specialized in, and like that should be owned and celebrated, I feel like.
You've opened my eyes a little bit there, because obviously I'm a recruiter, I'm in a sales environment, and the whole like celebrating a little bit of bullshit definitely applies to this industry. And when I say a little, I mean a lot. You know, the kind of philosophy of not everyone who shouts the loudest has the most to say doesn't apply here, right? And it's a very similar thing. But I guess I'd always assumed that that wouldn't be as prevalent in the engineering industry, because there's a lot more data, fact, there's a lot less that's up for discussion. But it sounds like my assumption is actually wrong, that there are still hundreds of different ways to utilize and implement different technologies, and you're going to be in camp A or camp B, and let's fight about it.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times we're under the impression that like, because technology is kind of like math-based, science-based, there are facts and there are, other wrong things. And there's like an answer to the problem, and that's the one answer. And that's just like, it's not how tech works. And we all have a background in that. And that's why I feel like a lot of us are like, yes, that's correct. But like, there's so much design and creativity that goes into building anything, let alone technology, when like the options are becoming, huge. Like there are a million ways to fix a problem. And I think that like saying the wrong thing isn't necessarily wrong. It's just a different way to think about it. And like, to expand on that, there are like a million ways to think about it. And they're like, okay, yeah, maybe we will use a relational database. So like, let's talk about that deeper, like why. So I do think that like people forget, and we forget that it is such a creative job. Like you do have to be creative. There are so many design components that go into it that people don't think about. Even like in, the 7 lines of code you're writing to loop through something, there's like 4 ways to do it. So like it is, interesting that it is such a math-based, career, and we are so math focused that like we do think, I often am like wrong, but that's right. It's just right different. It's like a little
it's right different. I love that. I'm gonna steal that, definitely. I mean, when you think about it, then a lot of what engineers are creating must feel like a baby. Like, this is my baby.
Yeah.
Like, I made it. I'm so proud of it. Like, I put everything into it. And then it goes, because you should be working collaboratively. So then it goes up for discussion. And then, I've got this visual in my head of kind of sitting there, like presenting it, and then having people almost in a good way tear it apart. Now, that can be, I would imagine, something that's quite difficult to handle, certainly in the early stages of your career, maybe in the later stages of your career if it's not handled in the best way. But how do you then adapt your communication style to, I guess, one, in terms of delivering feedback and avoiding belittling people or humiliating them or preventing them from ever trying anything different again, but also on the receiving end, like, how do you keep down the urge to say, oh, but actually, and actually open your mind to hearing other possibilities?
Yeah, I think communication, like I kind of talked about before in technology, is very like loudest, fastest, gets rewarded. And I think that's because that's rewarded, it's hard for people to change that. And I will say, like, I changed to fit that throughout, high school and college. I was like the shyest person you'd ever meet in high school. And like 2 years ago, I was like researching about, Silicon Valley and the tech industry and communication styles around it. And I was like, oh my God, like I have, to no offense of anyone, I love my personality, but I've turned into a white man. Like I am very like outgoing, like my thinking pattern is like whatever comes into my brain, I say it immediately without thinking about like the repercussions. I haven't thought through the whole plan. If someone's like, why? I would be like, I don't know. I just thought of it. So it's like very interesting that that's very rewarded in tech. And I feel like what is more typical, and I'm not saying like this is every female's personality, but a lot of women are more likely to like sit on something, think about it, make sure they have like a plan fully laid out before they present it. And so it's super interesting when you go into these meetings and like say, I've thought through my whole plan. People don't treat it like that. People treat it like just thought of it on the spot. And so it gets torn apart and you're kind of like, well, and you don't, a lot of times it's hard to interject because they're used to interrupting everyone. Like people interrupt in tech. And so I do think it's really hard to kind of come back and say, well, this is why, like, this is how I defend it. It's hard for people who have this loud, fast communication style to sit back and like take the feedback. So I do think that's something that like I would love to see change, that like we talk about hiring diversity all the time, but we don't hire, like I see a lot of times like we look for, she's a woman or she's Black or she's whatever, and she does fit the check boxes. But I would hope that we also like are looking to make sure like we're not just hiring diverse people who act like, straight white men.
Right.
Because like that means that you still don't have, like, while you have the diversity, you still don't have the inclusive environment to like to be able to uphold certain communication styles. So like if you're shy, like it's really hard in tech. Like we're not really shy in tech. We're really loud. It's like if you don't drink in tech, that's really hard because like everyone drinks and it's happy hours all the time. So I do like hope that we as an industry become a little more inclusive, and like there are a lot of things to learn from like sitting and thinking on your opinion before you shout it out first thing. And that's something I've definitely worked on a lot, making sure that like I am asking other people what their opinions are instead of just assuming that they'll shout them at me. And making sure that like those communication styles are appreciated and like are, I guess, like a lot of like are learned from. Like a lot of times, like I do wish people thought through their ideas before they came to me with them. Like I do wish that like, I don't know, people followed up with written communication post meetings. Like a lot of times, like people couldn't think on the spot in the meeting. And it's not a normal practice for someone to follow up after and be like, hey, by the way, like I jotted down all of my thoughts that I was having that I didn't say in the meeting. Like, hope you guys, like everyone in the meeting will look over these. Like, I wish that was more normal because it is like a 20-minute meeting to like decide something is crazy. So I think there's a lot to be learned from like having that diversity of communication style and thinking style, because I think we've all gravitated towards one, and I certainly have fit myself into, think fast, shout loudest. But yeah.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. One of the things that I see that makes my skin crawl is we really care about diversity. We want to hire diverse engineers, that have a computer science degree, that have 8 years of experience, that have short hair, that have, like all of these things. And you're like, is this to fill a quota? Are you pre-IPO? Do you want to look more appealing to investors? Like, what are you actually trying to drive change? And I think that that's the really interesting thing. And one thing that you mentioned, which is, I guess, opened my eyes, which, I'm ashamed to admit, I claim to be a DE&I advocate, and I try and do a lot for minorities in tech. And one of the things that you said, which is basically to challenge diversity of thought, right? It's not just about having these people in and creating equal opportunities. Like, that's great, and that's so important, and the work is so far from finished. But what do we gain from creating a more even split of people from all sorts of different backgrounds? And how can that challenge the status quo? How can that challenge sit down, shut up, let me speak? And what new ideas actually come from that? Like, imagine what we could create. So I think that's really interesting. And it's also very reminiscent of my experience in my career, and me at home versus me at work is very different. I work in an office with all men. We have females on the team, but here in New York, it's just me and a group of guys, and they're awesome. They're wonderful. But I've noticed that how I communicate with them is totally different compared to how I would communicate with my friends and family. And I think some of that does come from, I need to speak up to get ahead.
Right. Yeah. And it shouldn't necessarily be that way. Like, you should be able to bring your full self to work and not have to switch gears every time, because it's exhausting to be like, oh, where am I? Like, what do I say in this space versus what I say at home versus what I say with my friends? Shouldn't be so different. And for a lot of people, minorities in tech and women, it is different. And that sucks, because we do like fit into like, oh yeah, I love to go to happy hours. And like, I also like, what, I don't know, they're like rock climbing. When we do like rock climbing as team building, it's like, are you serious? Can we like get pedicures or something? Like, so I do think, like, a lot has to switch, and it shouldn't necessarily be that way.
Yeah, but it's people like you from the inside that are, creating a meritocracy, right? It's not, I am a woman, so hear me. It's, hey, I'm your equal. I'm really good at what I do, and you are too. And that's great. And you've got your strengths and I've got mine. And how can we kind of come together to just make sure that we can present things equally and we pick the right one? And that's it. So, yeah, I think for me personally, like, one of the things that must be the most important things for teaching you how to communicate, for creating opportunities, for just helping you get better is your manager. And how, in a business like Capital One, I would imagine there's several teams, hundreds of teams. And how do you inherit, or do you choose a manager in your experience?
So I just inherited, so our program, like right out of college, you just kind of get assigned to a team, and the managers review your resumes and they pick who they'd like to be on their team, but you don't really know your manager until they're already a manager, which can be difficult for sure. I had one manager at the beginning of my career who was great, but he was not planning to stay at the company for very long. So there was like not a lot to be built on that. And so he ended up leaving, and I got reassigned to my current manager, who was like a brand new manager, never managed anyone in his life, and was suddenly managing like 4 reports, and one of them was like older than him. Like, it was like a very hard thing, I know, for him to, inherit this team. And so there was a lot, like, I think the biggest thing about a manager that you need is that they need to want to help you, and they need to want to make sure that you're going to be successful. Because I mean, without that, like, you're screwed, I guess. Like, if they truly don't care what happens in your career, like, maybe look for a new manager.
Right.
But other than that, it's like all of those other skills, like, are honest feedback and being like, hey, like, I feel like there was a lot of feedback that happened between my boss and me that was important to make him a better manager and to make me a better reporter, obviously. But like, that's so often the way it goes, is that your boss gives you feedback and then you get better at your job. But sometimes you need to be like, hey, you're not doing everything that I need to be successful. Like, I need you to back me up in this meeting, or I need you to, come to this meeting with me and make sure that I'm doing it correctly. I think that people don't think about managing up. They don't think about giving that feedback that way. And like, it's honestly to help yourself, like that's their job. So I have found that like that drive, like he has wanted me to succeed, and like it has been so great. Like I've been promoted twice in 2 years and 8-ish months, which has been awesome. Like he is the best. He's super open to any feedback I have. We're more like work partners rather than like such a boss report relationship. Like it doesn't feel like that. I'm not scared to be like, I don't understand, or I can't finish it. Like I'm so confused,
Yeah.
which is important. And so he can provide that support, and it's been really great. And I do think that like it is important as a report to make sure that your manager is doing everything they can to support you and to make sure that you're going to be successful. Because I think, and whether that's just being like, I don't get what's going on, or if your manager is not checking in with you or checking in with you too much, like there's feedback that can be had there of like, you're all up on me, like I can't do this right now. Or like, I need more support, like I need more help because I'm drowning and I'm gonna fail if you don't like help me out here, because that's what they're there for. So I do think there's so much you can do as a report to make sure that you're being fully supported by your manager.
That's great, and I think really solid advice that comes in from the honesty, transparency, and also confidence piece that we were talking about. Is the traditional I am boss, you are servant leader, right? Like we hear this terminology, it's like, wait, what? Like what? It's 2021, like why are we using this language? But I spoke with an engineering manager who's awesome, who's relatively new, and his approach was, you're on that team, you just have a different job, right? Like you're all on the same team, and your job is to make their lives easier. So get out of the mindset of I'm in charge, do what I say, and figure out how you can just remove blockers. That's your job. Remove blockers, upskill. That's it. And it's a different skill set. But I think hearing you say, you know what, I give feedback, I manage up, and we have an amazing relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't need to be this anxiety inducing, oh my gosh, I'm going to criticize somebody and they're going to freak out and I'm going to get demoted and pack my things, Jeffrey, I'm off. Like,
I'm off.
So I think that's great, and something that not a lot of people will think to do, but something that benefits both parties, the team, ultimately the end user, right? Like if you can work better together, you're going to build something better.
Right. Yeah, I think, and one of the biggest things, like every one-on-one we have, he sits down and he said, well, he sits down virtually, I guess, and he says, like, what can I do to help you? Like, what do you need from me? And if that's the first question in the one-on-one, like, I think that is awesome. Like that you're giving space to be like, for the stat, it's not just like, how are you doing? What are you doing? It's like, what can I do to make sure that like this project is going to be great and that you're going to, get all of the skills and support that you need to create this great product. So definitely like advice to any managers out there.
I think, hearing you talk and it's a pleasure to speak with you. It's obviously your communication style is something that you've worked on and you're still working on. You're very aware. You're obviously passionate about what you do. I think it's no surprise to see why you have been promoted twice in 2 years, which is awesome. And I'm so pleased about. So, for me, I want to ask you a question, which we're asking everyone that comes on the show, but I think potentially more prevalent for someone like yourself is you had a relatively traditional entry into the engineering world and you've been promoted. You don't work at a Facebook or a Google, but you're awesome and you're being promoted and you're progressing and you're learning new things. So it's possible to do anything. So my question to you is, what advice would you give either engineers who are thinking about joining this industry or engineers who want to step up but maybe don't feel like they're capable of doing that?
Um, I think for anyone thinking about coming into the industry, the most important thing to make sure is that you enjoy what you do. And I don't necessarily like, you have to like to code. That's kind of, baseline. But like, it's also important to like to build something and like, or to like, I see a bunch of different types of engineers, and I'm someone that like, I'm the type of engineer that like wants to build the product. I don't like code for fun on the side at all. Like ever. And that's like surprising to a lot of people. A lot of people are like tinker. They like tech for the tech. And they, have their side projects where they code out like some fun thing, I don't even know. My boss just built like an Arduino that senses when a plane's flying over his apartment. I'm like, I don't know why you would like to do that. He loves it. So like he loves tech. Some people love tech, and that then definitely be an engineer. But I like coding, but I also more so like solving problems and providing like experiences and building something for a user. And I think that people don't talk about those kinds of people as often. But like I would never code for fun, and I think that's totally fine. Like I code 8 hours a day. I don't need to code, 12 hours a day. That's not important to me. So I think that's the biggest thing, to make sure that you're going to enjoy it. Because I do have a lot of friends that came in traditionally as computer science engineers, and then once they were here, they were like, I just did this for the money. And that's not enough sometimes. And so they have moved into product roles, which they enjoy. But I do think that like I was totally in it for the money when I started my major, and then was like, well, this is good news because I enjoy it. So I think that's, the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me, but really important when you're thinking about it. And I think that like there is this attitude in tech, and everyone's got to have it, that you're just so smart. Like I can do anything, because in reality, like I don't know how to do most things in tech. And so I think that there are a billion things, right? So like I most things I don't know how to do right now. And that's not what like getting promoted or succeeding in your career is really about. What you don't know, it's how to, get those tools to be able to tackle something you don't know, right? And that's like a lot of what you learn when you go to school to be an engineer. But like if you're not going to school for that, I think that like focusing on like it is problem solving. It's not necessarily that you can't code and go. Like it is, feeling comfortable being like, I don't know how to code and go, but I'm going to learn. Trust me, like I'm going to figure it out. And because I don't know, it has nothing to do with whether I'm going to succeed. So I think that's been like the biggest thing for me getting promoted, is being like, oh, I'll do that. Like I'll take this project and I'll run with it. Have I done something like this before? Not necessarily, but I it's going to be totally fine. I have the support around me that if I am failing, they will let me know and we will fix it and we will correct. So I think it's like having that confidence that like, just because I don't know how to do this thing does not mean that I can't do it. It just means I can't do it in this exact instant. And kind of making sure that all of those doors are still open. That like fully believing I'm like under this, I know it's a delusion, but I fully believe that I could do anything that anyone puts in front of me. And I think that's been really useful in my career. Well, I'm sure it will bite me in the ass one day. It has yet to do that. So that would be my.
I love that. I love that. And I think it's something that not just engineers should take, but everyone. And I want to thank you for your candor, because I feel like to come on here and say, I don't code for fun, right? Like I do other things that bring me joy and make me whole and ultimately make me a better engineer, and know that you're not going to be a social pariah for not saying that, you don't eat, sleep, breathe, and live code 24/7, and that's okay. And it doesn't make you any less passionate. It just makes you well-rounded. And not to say that somebody who does code for fun isn't well-rounded, but just in different ways. So thank you for that. And as I said, it's absolutely no surprise to me that you are where you are so early on in your career. And I'm really excited. I have a feeling that you're going to make a great manager in the not too distant future.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super, super excited for that stage eventually.
Well, thanks for jumping on, Kat. It was great.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I mean, like I said, I love to talk.
Well, that always works for a podcast.
Yeah.